Hi, I'm Esther Kane with SeniorSafetyAdvice.com. Welcome to our YouTube channel. If you've been seeing any of our videos or reading any of our articles, you know that Robin and I both very much talk about how we're helping our family members and friends with their senior loved ones as they start going into this journey of caring for them. Now, both Robin and I have already been through that. Both sets of our parents have since passed away, and we both have gone through the process of doing the caregiving for them. So we're just giving our advice based on our own experience. So I read an article just a little while ago by, I found it in livestrong.com, and it's such a good article about how adult children and family members can begin the conversation of talking to their senior loved one about, what's going to happen. How do you imagine, life will be as you get older? What do you imagine my role to be? What do I imagine it to be? It's an important conversation that, frankly, none of our friends and family have had with their loved ones. And the end result of that is that they end up making decisions at the very last minute, when it's emotional, when things are just, have to get done. Things have to get done, but obviously when you make a decision under conditions like that, it's not always the best decision. So this article had 15 tips on basically how to speak to a senior loved one, an adult, parent or family member, about your role or what they imagine will happen as they get older. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the tips right from the article because I can't say it any better than how they're saying it. But I'll let you know when there's a quote or whatever. But anyway, there's 15 tips. I have a link to the article below in the description, and the title is 15 Tips to Talk to an Aging Loved One about your role as a caregiver. Before I get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button. We appreciate each and every single one of our subscribers. And of course, click the like button if you like the video. Click the bell if you want to get notified of our upcoming videos. And of course, give us your comments and your tips on how you've handled the situation, if you have. From our experience, we've noticed that not many people actually have the conversation. And truthfully, we didn't have that with our parents either. So it's just not something that is often done, but it should be done. So learn from our experience, our mistakes, I guess I should say. All right, tip number 1, expect to have more than one conversation. One of the biggest mistakes people make when initiating this particular type of discussion is expecting to have just one chat and then that'll be that. It's all done and over with. But the truth is it takes much more than that. Social worker Jennifer Fitzpatrick says, very rarely does all of this get done in one conversation. Be prepared that the initial time these topics are introduced, your loved one is unlikely to commit to any plans. It often takes patience and persistence to get any of the decisions that you feel need to be made, end quote. It's also important to get into the talk of preconceived notions or assumptions about how it's going to go. What do they imagine it will be like? What do you imagine it will be like? What is the ideal scenario? What would be the worst scenario? Sometimes the conversations are unexpected. If they feel that the conversation is unexpected, they may get blindsided by it. So you kind of want to go into it gently and piece by piece instead of just, all at once. Fitzpatrick also says other times your loved one may actually be eager to discuss this as it's been on their mind too. And that would be the best case scenario, that if you begin this conversation and they are open to it and want to discuss it with you, then that will put everybody at ease. But still, you probably will need much more than just one conversation to, finalize any ideas or thoughts or plans. All right, tip number 2, keep the nature of your relationship in mind. The best place to start Steinert Powell says that the best place to start is to use the communication dynamics already built into your relationship. And Steinert Powell is a psychotherapist that's quoted in the article. Anyway, she says the best place to start is to use the communication dynamics that are already in place. If you have a great relationship with the person who's going to need your care, you can say something like, she says, "Mom, I know you may not want to have this conversation, but we should probably start talking about what we'll do if you need care or more care in the future." So using this kind of collaborative approach is always preferable because it gives that senior person a sense of control, a sense of independence in their future, in their own care. Steinert Powell continues, says, this will also minimize them viewing you as taking over their life. Now, mind you, this is if the person is cognizant, is aware. Obviously, if someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, these kinds of conversations will not work very well or at all. You may need a third party, may need a social worker with you, a doctor. You may not be able to have this conversation with them at all. So that's why it's even more important to have these kinds of conversations early on as possible. Anyway, on the flip side, still on tip number 2, if your relationship isn't so great with the person that you're going to be taking care of, then you want to consider an approach that's less direct. So saying something like, "Dad, have you given any thoughts to what type of care you might need when you get older?" This takes you out of the equation. You're not involved in it at all. You're just asking him a question, or what is he thinking? What does he want to happen? And at least that'll get the conversation going. And hopefully, if you don't have a great relationship with them, they won't lash out at you and and accuse you of anything. If that's the case, then you might end up needing a third party to be there with you. Someone that's trained that can speak with them, like a social worker or counselor or someone like that. All right, tip number 3, you want to set the stage. You want to start the conversation by explaining your intentions for this particular conversation. Pezel says you want to be honest about your concerns and your worries. You want to let them know that you want to act as their support system moving forward, and that you would like to talk about what that might look like. The important thing, that's an end quote, the important thing is really just to get an idea of what is it that they want and what would they like to happen. And then of course you're going to work, assure them that you want to work to try to do that as much as possible, make that happen as much as possible. And you want to invite them to think of topics that they'd like to discuss and decide on a time to chat that works best, of course, for both of you. This doesn't just give you both time to prepare what you'd like to talk about, but it also prevents your senior loved one from feeling, caught off guard or bombarded with this kind of information, and makes the process of taking care of them more of a team effort than just a takeover. And that's the important issue here. You want to include them in their care. You don't want to take over. Again, if they have dementia, Alzheimer's, you may not have any choice. But again, that's why it's important to discuss these kinds of things beforehand. All right, tip number 4. You want to start off on common ground. Once you both have your talking points prepared, you want to sit down and go through them, each of them one by one. Social worker Nicholas Hardy says, during the initial conversation, it's important to start with the ultimate goals and the items that you both agree on. When this is established, it can be used as the lens through which you filter future conversations. In other words, everything always goes back to these plans, these things that you both agreed on. A sample goal could be things like, they want to maintain a sense of normalcy as their health declines. They want to gain access to a community of support and define some kind of ongoing support options so that they're cared for 24/7 in case of an emergency. Pezel says, each person having the chance to contribute their topics allows them to have an equal voice in the conversation and know their feelings and opinions are valued. This is a theme throughout the entire conversation. You want to include them in the process, and you want to listen to them, and you want to, honor their decisions. Just like any conversation you would have about any important topic. All right, tip number 5. You want to emphasize that they are in the driver's seat. Steinert Powell says, whenever I work with adult children of aging parents, I always tell them to assure their loved ones that they're in the driver's seat of their future care. That's extremely important. And remind them that they have control over their caregiving needs. And you want to say things like, it's important to me that you don't feel like I'm trying to control you or your life when we're making these decisions. These are your decisions. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to try to do the best for you. I care for you. I love you. Let's work on this together. All right, tip number 6. You want to use I statements. This is a little bit of verbal psychology here, but you do want to try to keep emotions out of these discussions as much as you can. You don't want to come off like, cold and not having any feelings or emotions about it, but you also don't want to go over the top and get emotional and start crying and, make big deals out of little things. That's only going to upset the entire situation and probably end the discussion. So you want to, Fitzpatrick says, focus on giving specific, concrete examples of why you're concerned about your loved ones. You want to think about, if you're approaching them after you've noticed that they may start needing some help soon. It could be maybe they've had a slew of recent little fender benders lately. Maybe you've noticed that they're leaving the stove on in the kitchen more often, that they're maybe not getting, their personal hygiene is not what it used to be. All kinds of little things that make you think, well, maybe they're starting to need a little more help, so you begin having this conversation with them. Ideally, of course, you want to do it before any of these things happen, but if you're in that stage with them, you want to give them these examples of what you've noticed and what you've seen, instead of just, vague kinds of, well, I think you need more help. That doesn't say anything. Why do you think they need more help? So you want to be, using I statements like, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you on the road. I'm worried that you've left the stove on 3 times already that I know of. I'm worried. I want to take care of you. Help me to help you to stay safe. All right, number 7, you want to ask open-ended questions. And this, it really allows that person to give you more authentic responses. Pezel says, with open-ended questions, you have more opportunities to gather more honest answers, which will lead to stronger collaboration and better outcomes. A good example is, are there any health concerns you'd like me to know about or help with? Just anything that you can ask them so that they can give you, more information instead of just a yes/no answer. All right, tip number 8. You want to always, and with most conversations, I think, lead with empathy. This allows you to understand how your loved one might be feeling, to acknowledge their emotions, their feelings, their fears. You want to make sure that they understand that you are coming to them with empathy. Hardy says, we're often consumed by the facts of a situation and overlook the subtleties of how someone's feeling. Positioning yourself as someone who cares versus someone who's the expert is invaluable. You want to be their loving friend, relative, son, daughter, whatever, versus the person who's going to be taking over and taking charge. Because there's a lot of fear in growing older and losing control and independence. So if you can try to understand that and put yourself in that position, it might help you to have the conversation with your senior loved one. And you can show empathy. The article says you can show empathy by asking how they feel about what the two of you are discussing. You want to listen intently and not only listen to their words, but watch their reactions, see how they are responding to you? Are they hesitating? Are they openly? Are they, hesitant to speak about certain topics? You want to understand their perspectives and let them know verbally how difficult this is for you to talk to them about it, and you can understand how difficult it is for them, but that how important it is, because you need to make plans. We're all getting older, no one's getting younger, so you need to make plans to try to make the last decades as wonderful as possible. All right, tip number 9, you want to address their concerns. It doesn't matter how good your intentions are. Even if you go into the conversation from a place of, wonderful enthusiasm and so on, it doesn't matter. It may trigger resistance in your senior loved one. I mean, why not? It's a topic they don't want to think about. They may be thinking about it a lot, but don't want to know about it. They don't want you to know about it. They think you're going to worry about it. There's a whole slew of reasons why seniors tend to avoid these kinds of topics. But one way to hit the brakes on being unintentionally pushy is to remember that one of the main concerns your loved one may have is losing control of their life. So you want to continuously, address that concern for them and tell them that you want to work with them. You're not here to work against them. You want to be their team player in this process as they grow older. Steiner Powell says, not only is it difficult to admit you may need more care, but in some cases there's concern their freedom may be limited, or perceived freedom, in that the person who needs care thinks they're more socially active or independent than they are in reality. Or they might be taken advantage of financially. There's a lot of family history that goes into all of this, a lot of past relationship issues that go into all of this. So that's why sometimes it's not great for just a one-on-one conversation. Sometimes you do need that third party mediator basically to help you through this process. All right, tip number 10. Expect a pushback. This is very common. This is actually what happened with my siblings and my mother. When we did begin to talk to her about these in very small increments, and it was actually, we should have done it much sooner, but we knew it was going to be difficult, and she gave us a very strong pushback. It took us a very long time to get to any information out of her. But so expect pushback. It's not uncommon. It's not about you, believe me. You could go in as empathetic as possible with all full intentions. You could, read it right off the script and it'd be perfect, but you may still end up getting pushback. There's a lot of fear about the unexpected, and many seniors are facing the unexpected, the final unexpected. And, realizing or even just imagining that they're going to need more care than what they're used to. People fussing over them, doing things for them all the time, them not being able to do a lot of things. It's very emotional for them and fearful. So you want to be sensitive to that sense of loss and fears that they're experiencing. Steiner Powell says this won't always be easy, and at times their resistance to your attempts to help them may be exceptionally frustrating. I can attest to that. But if they do become resistant, defensive, or angry, walk away. Try again another time when things come down. Don't push it because you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to be hitting a wall most of the time. At least that was my experience. All right, tip number 11. You want to define your terms. You want to consider drawing up a contract that both of you will sign, with boundaries, expectations, and all of that. And actually, this is a great idea if you have siblings, because then, right from the get-go, you can begin assigning or collaborating on who's going to do what. And that eliminates a lot of anger and frustration later on when your senior loved one is at the stage, if they get to that stage where they're simply unable to care for themselves. So Steinwith Powell says this might sound outlandish to some people, to have a contract, but it's a very important step in the early caregiving process, especially when there hasn't been a great relationship between the person who needs care and the caregiver in the past. Basically, you just want to outline what it is that they want, that you want, and you have it written down. I mean, it doesn't have to be an official notarized contract kind of thing, but it has to be something that the two of you can agree on and work on. And there's nothing wrong with writing it down, especially with siblings, because that can bring up a lot of issues later on. All right, tip number 12, respect their decisions. Pezel says, while we may have the best of intentions for our loved ones, it's important to recognize their self-determination. This term is mostly used in therapeutic settings, but is fundamentally important because it refers to each person's ability to make choices and manage their own life. Again, you want to respect their decisions, but of course, if they have cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, it's going to be a very, you can't respect their decisions depending on what stage they're in. So you have to be, it's a little bit like walking on eggshells at this point. But again, the use of an elder law attorney or social worker or counselor may be very useful when speaking with someone like this, but you have to respect their decisions, whatever they are. This is their life, not yours. You can only tell them what you think they need, but it's their life and their decision. And honestly, that's how it came to be with my mother. We had to come to that conclusion that although we didn't agree with her decisions, it was her life. All right. Tip number 13, recap your talks. And at the end of each of these conversations that you have, it can be helpful to recap, to repeat, what you've discussed in the conversation, just to remind them, okay, this is what I thought you said, this is what I think you said, and just go over it again. It also gives the other person time to think about it, ruminate about it a little bit, and maybe respond differently. And also, don't be surprised if in the next conversation they may have changed their mind about something. That's okay. You want to keep repeating this information over and over again until you have it all finalized as much as you possibly can. All right, tip number 14, don't force a resolution. In other words, I'm going to be in town on Tuesday and we're going to have the conversation and it all has to be done right then and there. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. And even if you do that 5 times, it's probably not going to happen. And even if they argue with you or resent you or push back, don't force it. Don't push it. Don't force it. Remember, it's their decision. Steinwith Powell says that when this is the case, if the person you're wanting to take care of is of sound mind and body, then there's really nothing that you can do. This is their decision. It's their life. Remember that. All right, the last tip, number 15, keep talking. As I've said, you want to keep repeating and bringing this up, when it's appropriate. Because planning and decision making for your loved one can be complex and ever evolving. It's important to keep talking. I mean, you may have a conversation with your parents today, beginning to this whole discussion, and maybe 5 years from now, your father has a severe stroke. Well, that's going to change a lot of things about the plans. So then you have to, revisit everything and change everything all over again, or at least a lot of the things, maybe not everything. But this may, when you want to talk with them, you also want to be let them know that you're grateful about them working with you. You want to thank them for sharing this information with you, for trusting you, for working with you instead of against you. Hopefully they are working with you. Hardy says, ensuring the person feels heard and is comfortable expressing themselves will allow for future conversations organically. Everyone wants to be taken care of as they grow older. The trick is how and by whom, and what will it look like. And it's less fearful if you already have a picture in your head of what that will look like, not only for the senior person, but for the adult children, for the caregivers as well. Because growing older is not easy. It's not for the weak of heart. There's a lot of unknown factors. There's a lot of issues that come up that we have no control over. So as much as you can possibly plan to make the transition as smooth as possible, it will make the final decades of everyone's life much smoother, happier, and more fulfilled. All right, I hope these tips were useful for you. Again, it's from livestrong.com. I thought it was a great article. I'll have a link to it below. I'll put the general 15 tips down in the description below as well. Don't forget to subscribe, click the like button, give us your comments on what your tips might be if you've had this conversation. And of course, ask us your questions. We'll try our best to answer them. All right, everyone have a wonderful week. And I will talk to you later. See you next time. Bye.